is the Speak Easy podcast, where we talk about the behind the scenes of what it is to be a speaker or an author. That includes the bumps, the bruises, that includes the not so good times, the uncomfortable moments. And I'm excited about this particular episode because I found that there's a stigma that's still kind of hovering over families and generations as a dark cloud. And it's that stigma of what goes on in this house stays in this house. And those of that who have been following the broadcast for any length of time, you know that I've shared my story. And in sharing my story was really how I was able to delve into building a sustainable business, speaking on stages across the U.S. and next year it'll be internationally, writing several books. It's all come from me sharing that story, sharing that painful part of me. Now, it's not to say that each and every person is supposed to get on stage in front of thousands of people and talk about what happened in their childhood, but it is to say that your message can definitely help and impact somebody. And you may not share it on a stage. You may share it through a company that you're doing that helps a certain demographic. You may do it through writing a book. You may do it through just working with youth. I mean, there's so many different avenues for us to be able to have our voice heard. And here on the Speak Easy podcast, that's always our push, is that we want you to have your voice heard. So I'm excited. I'm super excited about our guest today because we're going to talk about some deep stuff, y'all. No, we are going to talk about how talking about that deep stuff can really set you into a whole different other path. A lot of times on a much different path than what we originally thought we would be on. Simply because we find that people connect with it, the story, we find that it opens up opportunities, it opens up doors. Sometimes it even opens up a couple wounds that we thought were kind of healed, but they weren't necessarily healed. And so today's guest is going to be talking about some things when it comes to being able to talk about those hidden secrets, those things that are in the lockbox that nobody really wants to talk about. So today's guest is Oredolapo. Yes, I still said it right. Oredolapo is our guest for today. And so tell them a little bit about yourself and then we'll dive into today's topic.
You touched on pretty much everything. Definitely shared. Being able to share my story was cathartic. And the more I shared, the more it just became such a big release. So with that being said, again, wanting to make sure that we're aware of the stigma of mental health and getting rid of the whole what goes on in this house stays in this house. Definitely with our children, because when we do that to our children, that locks them into whatever issues that they got going on. So that is where I'm at as a speaker, as an author, wanting to make sure that everybody is aware and understands that in a sense, the biggest connection that we make is connecting with each other. And by doing that, we're allowing each other to say, you know what, I'm really smiling outside, but it's not really working for me inside.
And so we're going to dive into today's topic because I said that, as speakers and authors, a lot of times, the more transparent we are, the more that we show people that, we're not perfect, that we may have some wounds, some that are open, some that are scars. We may have some things that are going on behind the scenes. It really opens up an opportunity for us as well as opens up an opportunity for them, but that's a huge step. And so what made you decide, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk about what it is that I've gone through?
Oh, that was a big one. It was a long time coming. I knew I had a book in me. Ironically, my grandmother had said, I know there's going to be a writer in the family. And she gave me some archaic, it looked like it was from the 70s, and we was already in the 90s. But the fact that, she was like, I know somebody's going to be, and that sat with me like 20 some odd years. And what made that change is because I felt such a release in just writing stuff down. I've always loved to write. And I kept a journal and writing things down, and then the side note, the irony of that is my grandmother always used to say, don't write stuff down because, then people can hold it against you. But, but here it is, she's encouraging me to share a story. I knew that I had some issues from my child, but I didn't know that was the story, because I boxed it in. And then, that's how depression comes. That's how anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and all that other bad stuff comes about. So, like I said, what really pushed me was the more I wrote, the more I kept a journal, the more I felt released. And the biggest leap was when I wrote a forgiveness letter to myself. That was like, okay, somebody else needs to know this because I can't keep this good information to myself. I need to share it. And the best way that I know how to share is by writing.
And I know that must have been hard. That first experience, I tell people all the time, it's so interesting when we think, people coming into the industry, they often think, oh my goodness, so I'm just going to step on a stage and want to talk about everything that I've ever gone through. And it's just going to be so easy. And the reality is the first time that you tell it is normally not on a stage. The first time that you're telling that story, it's normally in a personal conversation with someone who sometimes someone you just met. How about that one?
Okay.
Or we got, the drunk auntie or drunk uncle that kind of brings up the topic at the family cookout, or we have some things that really come on. And when it comes to actually telling the story, in the beginning, there is no structure to it. There is no pretty way of talking about it, because that's what people think. They think in order for me to be able to share my story has to be pretty. Right? It has to sparkle and have rainbows and unicorns all throughout it. And the reality is that's not real.
Mm-mm.
That's not real. The reality is that there's pain there's tears, there's fear. And when we decide that we're going to share our story, whether we're sharing it in a book, whether we're sharing it on a stage, or just sharing it with a close friend, that process is going to be painful. It's going
Not only the process painful, but what other thing that a big takeaway that I had was recovery is not linear. It is not a straight trajectory. You're gonna have some serious lows after you've had, like, I've come to this realization, I feel good. I'm doing my hair, I'm taking showers, little things, I'm taking showers on a regular basis, and then you hit a wall out of nowhere. You hit a wall and then you don't know what to do, because we've been told that it's going to be beautiful, like you said, rainbows and glitter, and you're going to feel good for the rest of your life. That was something that, we just don't, that information we don't get. That piece we don't get. And until you've experienced it, and, you have resources. I call it my mental health toolbox. You have things you can say, okay, you know what? I am feeling a little panicky. What can I do? What has worked for me before to get over this? Because it's not great. It's a lot of tears out of nowhere, and just wanting to talk to people, but being afraid to talk because you don't want to be stigmatized. You don't want to become, the black sheep of the family who has this, mental health issue. You don't want to become the friend that people shy away from, because having those conversations make them uncomfortable. Not that they don't want to help, but they don't know how to receive.
That says so much, because there's so many stigmas that come with it. So those of you that are tuning in today's particular broadcast, we're going to be talking about some things that may get pretty close to your heart. We're going to be talking about some things concerning abuse, some things concerning depression, and even going into, because what ends up happening is we end up seeing people and we see them from the outside in. And so from the outside in, we see the face. We see the great family. We see everything's going well. We see everybody's excelling. We don't see it from the back end. And so we don't really know the behind the scenes. So when things happen, like when Robin Williams committed suicide, we were devastated because he was someone who made so many people smile and made so many people. He never really talked about that part of his life. And it goes back to saying, wow, you never really know what somebody is going through. You never really know. And so this may spark some conversations in your household. This may spark you to tell your story and sit down, and even if it's just telling your story to your children or to your husband or to your wife or whoever it is that you need to connect with, there's somebody that may, their life may be changed simply from you telling that story. And so it definitely speaks volumes that you were able to tell your story. Now, with your story, I don't want to give it all away. With your story, what was the first way that you were able to share your story? Was it the book first or was it the speaking first?
It was actually the book first, because I was still horrified. For me, writing it's comfort. It's secure. Like I said, it was so cathartic for me. It was big release. But as I started writing and actually made the decision a couple of times, because it was sometimes I was like, you know what, we just gonna keep this under wraps. Because then too, I also I wanted to be careful with how I share, as well as what I share. Because even though it's my story, there's still some other people in my story. And I needed to be accountable to them, even though they were the aggressor, the abuser, because the relationships are very close and intertwined. So yes, it is my story, but I do have other people that I need to be kind to, even though they weren't kind to me, because that's how I operate, And I think it keeps other people, especially those involved, from lashing out, and then unnecessary more abuse coming in different forms in different ways, because now we're older and wiser. So it was definitely the book first, and then the conversations. But I would say, I was throw it out there. Yeah, I'm writing a book. You're writing a book. You get, you see the people's antennas going up and what have you. And some people that I've shared that with, they kind of just like, okay. And then there's, I have some really great cheerleaders. They were like, do it. You need to do it. And as they were telling people, yeah, she writing a book, and conversations came to me, how can I, I was like, people really want to talk about this stuff? Like, seriously, how does this work? Where is this going? I'm not ready. I haven't even published a page yet. Like, what is going on? Because, like I said, I'm writing it. I'm writing it for me. Man, I'm not writing it at all. I'm writing it. I'm publishing it. Maybe not. It was, that up and down for a while. So the speaking finally came when I said, okay, after being in and out of shelters with my children and understanding what goes on when you're in a mental health crisis, and now you're in a shelter and you got to deal with people and their problems and their issues. And I said, yeah, I need to reach out to shelters and have these conversations and have them, help them understand that you're really not alone. Not only are the people on the outside of the shelter going through some stuff mentally, but there's, the people that you live with here, and you can help each other.
That's definitely like a powerful statement to say, because a lot of times we don't, again, we have, first and foremost, you said so many different things. Okay, so first, guess what? When we decide that we're going to share our story, share our voice, the reality comes in is that life is still going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so even through this process, you talked about how you were going and you were still putting it out there, and you were going through being in a shelter, you were going through your own situations in that moment. And we kind of go back and forth with putting, saying that we're going to do the event, or that we're going to speak, or we're going to do an event, or we're going to write the book. And we kind of do that seesaw back and forth with ourselves. We're going to do it, we're not going to do it. We're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. And the reality is that's the process that a lot of us go through, simply because we don't know how people are going to react. We don't know what people are going to say. But then we still have real life right here, now, present time that's going on. And sometimes it doesn't seem like it's the right time to tell a story. It doesn't seem like it's the right time to share our message. It's not the right time for us to write the book or publish the book. And I do agree definitely with you that, writing the book is very helpful. Writing, period, when it comes to depression, abuse, is super helpful in getting through that process. Putting it on paper. Some people, we in the technology age, so some of you may do talk to text, although at some point that comes out a little funny. So somebody may do talk to text. Somebody may just record themselves. Somebody may go live. We have so many different options now. And with us having so many options, we're able to do so much. Like, we really are able to do a whole lot of stuff, that part. And so I'm super excited because guess what? We have opportunities beyond opportunities when it comes to sharing our story. That's amazing for us. We really do. We really do. Now, in this process, I know you said that's the other thing, is that sometimes when you're coming through this, there's going to be some people that are like, yes, I want to be your cheerleader. I support you. And then you're going to have some other people that are just like,
and that does not feel good at all, because that it causes a definite regression. You definitely find yourself like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I had definitely had an experience with that with a family member who I know has a similar scenario, and they weren't ready. They themselves weren't ready. So who am I to tell them, you need to divulge, and, we need to rah together. It doesn't work that way. So and I definitely wasn't in that headspace then. In the book, you hear me say hindsight is 20/20 quite a bit, because at that point, I thought like, well, why is she not wanting to share? Why does she not want, we basically have the same abuser. I know this is going on because I see the pattern. And as I got a little more aware of how mental healthness works, I was like, oh, she was not ready. She was not ready. And that is something else we don't really, we know when our people aren't okay, but sometimes they just need you to sit there and listen, or just sit there. You just share space with me. Let me get comfortable with you. I know a scenario where a young lady said that her and her therapist just sit there and look at each other. She shows up. She said, I show up, as scheduled, not late, but I'm just not ready to open up to this woman yet. And, obviously there's some other things going on, but the fact that she shows up, she sits in this space with this woman, you got to let people feel you out. A lot of times, we hear the word energy. Sometimes people are just trying to feel your energy. Like, because if you push me, I may be the type to just push back or push away. So let me feel how you're going to come at me. Let me see how you're going to receive my information.
And I think that's a huge turnoff, that you get so many people that they're excited that they're telling their story, that they feel as though everyone should be ready to tell theirs. And I kind of got to tell people, wait. Everybody's not ready. Everybody's not at that same place just yet. And they're like, no, I did mine and now they can come and do theirs. And wait a minute.
Give me a bit.
Moving a little too fast here. Because what ends up happening is you end up deterring people that you were possibly meant to help.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And
indeed.
we never want us telling our story to be a negative. We never want it to be, and that's one of the battles that we go through in our head when it comes time to tell our story, is that you don't want people to take it negatively. You don't want people to have a negative experience from it. Matter of fact, can I just be honest? Let's be real. Let's be honest that there are so many that don't say anything about being abused or about mental health or about any of those things, simply because guess what? That means that somebody may have done something that they weren't supposed to do, or somebody didn't do something that they were supposed to do, and we don't want them to feel bad.
Yes. I got a lot of labels based upon things that I was supposed to do, things that I wasn't, whether it was from the abuser or whether it was because now how I'm soothing myself is with self-sabotaging behaviors. So now, I miss this, I miss that. But nobody really knows what's going on. So there's a song, I'll Be That. And I started taking that on. When in actuality, I was none of those things. I was not any of that stuff. But to just, I don't want to hear it. I don't want nobody talking to me. I'll be that. Hot tamale, I'll be that. I'm fast in my pants, I'll be that. When in actuality, I really wasn't any of those things to my core. My behaviors displayed that, because of, again, how mental health works. But I was none of those things. And and that's where a lot of the stigma comes from. Even I actually started working with addiction, helping people recover from addiction, because that definitely mental health is linked in there more often than not. You don't really see people just say, you know what, I'm going to start abusing, misabusing substances. You don't see that, that's not how that works. So with that being said, one of the keys that I took away was, even when you're behaving in a manner, nobody wants to be labeled a drug abuser. Nobody wants to be labeled a prostitute. Nobody wants to be even hot in their pants. Nobody wants to. We'll twerk 1,000,000 times in one, but please do not tell me I'm hot in my pants. I'm just having a good time. So that stigma that there's so many layers of stigma that comes. When you're depressed, you don't want to do anything, so you're lazy. You're when you have other mental health illnesses such as bipolar, you're flighty, you're unreliable. So there's not only is just the stigma of the mental illness itself, but there's other labels that come with it that stigmatize you.
And let's be honest, let's be real, that the stigmas don't go away. There's somebody out there that thinks, oh, well, when I publish the book, when I start speaking on stages, then the stigmas go away, right?
Not even close. Because you find yourself having to explain that even more so. And then people are still looking at you like, but yeah, I remember back in the day when you used to, it doesn't go away. I'm getting ready to turn 47 years old, and I can guarantee you, I can run into 1,000,001 people that I've known from my childhood, and they will say, but yeah, remember you used to, you still used to it. It doesn't go anywhere. I could have conversations, you could see me talking to somebody, of stature, still nothing. Yeah. How you get to know her? You ain't that bright. Yeah, it doesn't leave. So you have to shore up. You find some confidence with this. And like I said, writing is actually a comfort for me. And speaking is what took me out of my comfort zone, because you have to be confident. You have to not only know your topic, but you have to definitely know you. You have to definitely say, okay, you know what? I'm doing this. This is the reason why I'm doing it. I know there's going to be various forms of backlash that come. I'm prepared. And you have to have a plan. You have to say to yourself, when they hit me with XYZ, I'm either going to reply in this manner, or I'm going to say, thank you and have a good day and walk away. Because it doesn't stop. It actually, in some instances, turn it up a little bit.
It most definitely is. And turned up, I mean, completely. Because now not only are you doing it in front of, you're right, people that you don't know, people that are just meeting you for the first time, people that are just getting to know you. But now when you go back home, all they see is who you used to be. They don't see you in person.
I've literally had to tell people recently, both close to me and those who only know of me through speaking, you can't talk to me like that. Just because you heard my story and in my story there was this particular behavior, you can't talk to me that way. You know, you can't greet me in that manner. And it, again, that's where the confidence piece comes in really strong. Because with depression and most mental health issues, you do not want to talk to people. You do not want to talk to people. So that confidence dwindles to a point where it's almost non-existent. So that's another fight. You know, like I said, stepping out to speak was like, girl, you done really stepped in it now. You done really got both feet in. What are you doing? So again, I had to plan. I had to have a plan of, this is how I'm going to address this, because it's going to happen. And like I said, recently I've had to tell people, you can't speak to me that way. Like it or leave it.
And you know what that definitely says? It says so much. There's a quote that says, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And, you know, that's the truth, because so much of our past has created who we are right now, but we're not there anymore.
Indeed.
I'm not in high school anymore. I'm not in college anymore.
Indeed.
Don't want to go back to that point in my life. Like, I'm not there anymore. And you can't treat me as if I'm still there. You can't treat me as if I'm stuck in that moment, simply because you may be stuck in that moment.
That part.
You can't treat me like I'm still stuck in that moment. And so that's a part of this process. When somebody says, I'm ready to tell my story, I tell them, okay, let me show you what that means. Let me take you through this journey. Because I've had people come to me and they're like, oh no, I'm ready to tell my story right now. I'm ready to write the book. And I'm like, okay. And then they start writing, and then they stop writing. And then they're like, you know, I didn't know this was going to be involved.
Yeah.
Guess what? This process is just that. It's a process. Because when you're getting on stage, that emotion may hit you on stage. That emotion may hit you in the parking lot, talking to someone who heard you speak. That emotion may come at any given time. So you're going to have to deal with some of those things beforehand. But guess what? As you're going through and sharing, it's going to come back.
Indeed.
There's no way for you to detach.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. My therapist actually said to me, the more you speak about it, you become desensitized. I was like, girl, bye. But in a sense, it doesn't necessarily desensitize you, but it does help you to, you're not getting any audio? You getting audio from me? Okay. It doesn't necessarily desensitize you, but it does give you the confidence to speak. It gives you the confidence to have conversations. And when those emotions do hit, you're okay. it's not like you feel like you have completely like, oh my gosh, I done told these people, you can do this, be that, recover, and here it is, I'm falling out in the parking lot. Or this has happened. Somebody heard me speak somewhere else and they noticed me walking from my car to the building, and we're walking and talking and they're sharing, and I'm having a moment because I'm connecting to their emotion. The story wasn't really similar, like the bits and pieces, but the emotion was. And I was connecting to that emotion. And she's looking at me like, you gonna be okay? You gonna be able to do this? So I had to explain to her, I'm literally feeling what you're feeling, because there are pieces of my story where that emotion actually happened and I'm connecting with it. And I'm going to let myself have this moment. I may need, an extra 2 minutes to splash my face and drink some water, but I'm okay. I'm okay. She's like, girl, I hope I didn't mess you up. I'm all right. But thank you for sharing. That's that connection.
And what's funny is that people often think, oh, well, how do I know if I'm supposed to be a speaker? How do I know if I'm supposed to tell my story? Do people come and ask you and talk to you just randomly about stuff that you've been through? And they may not have known that you particularly have been through it, but they'll just come and just randomly talk to you about conversations. And you're sitting there going, okay, I don't know you. Stranger danger. But
yes,
like, really, they do. And they just come and they start talking to you. That was the way that I knew that it was time for me to start sharing my story, because I had women who would come up and who would tell me their story and knew absolutely nothing about my past, knew absolutely nothing about what I had been through. But there was some relief that they felt in being able to share it with me. And I went so far as to say that, because I had not told anybody about my past, that made it harder for me, because they were, revealing all of this stuff. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, that actually is what definitely guided me. The running joke is people walk up to me like out of nowhere. I live in, New York, so public transportation is a constant. And and the stranger danger is real. Like, yeah, okay. Especially, when it's just random. You done sat next to me for 2-3 stops, and then all of a sudden you want to have a conversation about, anything and everything. And next thing you know, you done found a friend on the train. And that has happened quite a bit. And, in the laundromat, my friend definitely makes jokes. He's like, I can't leave you for 5 seconds. And then it's like, I was just standing here trying to figure out what milk to buy. I mean, it has happened so often where it's like a tug, because the other thing he said was, I was actually having a hard time finding work. And he said, I think the universe is really pushing you in a different direction. And I was like, man, leave me alone.
I had to laugh because that's I think the running joke for everybody. At some point, you've had somebody tell you that you were going to have some type of success, or that you're supposed to be doing something, and you're like, you're funny.
Right, exactly. Boy, bye, leave me alone. And I just said, and the more I received it and opened up to it, the more ideas came. Like, how can I help? Because that's what the speaking piece is. It's just another form of helping. You may not be able to afford, the book No Longer Crying Alone, but you may be in a facility where, one of the programs has hired a speaker. You may be in a scenario where your job offers this service of a speaker. Because what I'm finding interesting is, we hear speakers in a corporate world, they're usually talking about business stuff. They know they need to bring people in because, everybody's got something going on. My daughter sent me something not too long ago, and it said, be kind to your parent because they have a childhood that they're healing from. I'm sitting like, my baby gets it. corporate America is getting it too. I expect you to produce at my place of business, and how can I expect you to do that when not only do you got old wounds, but you might have some new stuff going on. You might have some current stuff going on. So again, the speaking piece is definitely just another form, another platform to help other people.
Now, in this journey of, going through depression and dealing with the abuse, and, sometimes, again, we go through this whole process of we start, we stop, we start, we stop, simply because of the responses we're getting from other people, simply because sometimes we may get some backlash, sometimes we may get some responses that just kind of, they weren't negative, but they weren't really supportive. And so that kind of, plays with our mind a lot too. So in all that you've received and dealt with up until this point, looking back, would you go back and say, you know what? I would have never done it. I wouldn't do it over again. Or do you look at what you've been through and say, wow, no, I can endure a little bit longer because I know what it's doing on the other end of it?
Even with not knowing what's on the other end, I feel like it's my duty to endure. I probably would not have stopped as much, because a lot of the stopping was me. I would write stuff and I didn't know how to deal with all of that emotion. I didn't, because it's like as I'm writing and I'm writing in detail, I literally can see the abuser's clothes. I can see their expression. I can see, how that connection between what had happened and now how my self-sabotaging behaviors are coming about. And now that's making me feel less than. That's making me feel like, so now I got to pick up this forgiveness. I know what the process looks like. And even if I didn't know this is where I would be, I would still do it, because one of my biggest things, and this is actually, I'm giving away a little bit. We're going to give away a little bit more in a second. But Toni Morrison is actually, next to Maya Angelou, my absolute favorite author. And in doing some research for The Bluest Eye, Toni Morrison's book, I came across a quote that she wrote. And it says, if there's a book that you feel that should have been written and it hasn't, you should write it. And I was like, wow, her too? Why does all these things are just, and it's like, okay, you can't really fight it much longer. You got somebody you ain't ever heard from, all you'd have done is read her books, and it's just dropping in your lap constantly, So not knowing what the journey would have resulted in, I still would do it, because I really know that little girl who I was, who went unnoticed, like I said, I mentioned to you earlier, moody was a word that was written on a comment written in a report card about me. You're a teacher. You're telling my parent that this child is moody. Not that my academics is poor, but this child is moody. That little girl didn't get acknowledged the way she needed to be acknowledged, and she suffered. She needs to tell that story so that other little girls, big little girls, everybody, because even our men are going through it. They're told to not cry. They're told to, you're not manly if thus and so. They have to have a release too. So yeah, I definitely would do it again.
So it's interesting, because as we go through the journey, of course, there's bigger pieces to it. It extends way beyond what we imagined in the beginning. And that start and stop process, when we look back, that's the thorn in your side sometimes, because you question yourself and say, well, if I would have started a little earlier, how many more people would be hurt? Would be saved? How many more people would be, see that hurt as no longer a stumbling block, but see it as a stepping stone. People would be able to, look at their story and say, I can build from this. It's interesting because I was sitting at my daughter's field hockey game, and they had just rebuilt a school that was nearby. And so they were breaking down the older school, and you were looking at it, and literally they were knocking the walls down, dust everywhere. And I said, somebody was like, well, why are they knocking it down? Sometimes things need to be knocked down in order for it to be rebuilt stronger.
Indeed.
Made into something better.
Indeed. And that is what has happened. That truly, I get amazed at my confidence and my strength. Whereas before, when people say, oh, you're so strong, I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like the weakest person. Like, what? That doesn't even, that's not even something you could say in the same sentence, Oredolapo and strength. It doesn't work that way. But I know that I'm strong because of what I have endured. And there was a lot of knocking down. There's still some trying to knock me down. They still trying because they thought they had succeeded, or they did succeed for such a long period of time. They still gonna try that hand. And again, creating boundaries. Okay, you can't talk to me that way. I will attend this function, for this particular time. Even having some affirmations as I'm walking in, calming myself, deep breathe. Again, that mental health toolbox, it comes in handy a lot because I am able to, not only be what I've said I've been, but I can show you here and now in real life form. These people are not going to, this scenario is not going to work out for me. This particular person or this particular group of people still sees me in that light. I need to take a pause. I need to regroup. I need to remove myself from the situation. However, it needs to work because you can't, well, for me, I'm going to keep it on me. For me, I cannot be someone who says, okay, this is what has happened. This is what I'm doing. Now let me, go into the world and not do and be that. Because one of the biggest pieces of recovery is showing. Let me show you not only how to do it, but how to maintain it.
That's it. And so your newest book, I'm smiling over here about this next piece, because your newest book is No Longer Crying Alone. And it's sitting here making me smile because my first book was It's Okay to Cry.
Wow.
And so, and you talked about it a little bit where, there is that stigma for if you cry, you're weak. If you cry, you can't handle it. You're not supposed to cry. You're supposed to just get over it and get on with your life. And the reality is that, guess what? That doesn't work.
Not even close. That comes from my grandmother. She was, my maternal grandmother is of Barbadian descent. So that comes with a lot of discipline. That comes with discipline. And my cousins and I, we have some stories. But one of her biggest things that she always said was, laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. And that's where that comes from. That's where that comes from because, for a long time, I was like, she's smart. But it's really not her quote. I can't remember the lady who actually made that quote, but it's truly not my grandmother, but that stuck with me. Like that's something I remember very, very young. And she said it for so long, probably as long as she could talk. And it just stuck with me. And then when I actually started speaking and realizing that people are like drawn to me, that's when I was like, you're not really alone in this. You have so many people who can connect with you. If it's not the same, act that caused you to have some trauma, it's definitely that emotion that you can feel, that you can connect with, and perhaps help each other to grow.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, so that spoke volumes to me because that was one of the things that, we talk about those things that kind of hold us back when we're deciding that we're going to tell our story. That was one of the things, was the title of the book. Because I was like, don't nobody want to know about it's okay to cry? And nobody want to read nothing about crying and staying up? No. Why would they want to read that? But I found that was one of the biggest things that people had to overcome, is that they felt like I don't have enough time in the day to cry.
Okay.
I got to take care of kids, myself, husband, wife, family, job, church, home, the dog, the goldfish, the hamster, the guinea pig. I got to take care of so many things. I don't have time to sit down and cry. I don't have time to get a tissue, blow my nose. That's too much. So now I got to go through and try to make things work. And we end up breaking ourselves down and not getting the support and the help that we need for ourselves. And then what ends up happening? Complete and utter explosion. Everything falls. It's like we're trying to juggle all these things, and then we trip and everything falls and shatters. And then we're kind of looking around going, but why didn't anybody help me? But we didn't take that time to say, I need help.
Yeah, I actually had that experience. I shared with you, in detail that somebody very close to me should have been able to pick up on this stuff. Not only did you see where the teacher said this child is moody, but you are in a field where this is your job. This is what you do every day. And it wasn't picked up. And I was livid. I was, how can this happen? Like, how could this be completely missed? So the crying piece was, I was weak because giving some more away, but I was actually called the egg in my family because I cracked easily. And I could be watching, something on TV with my siblings. I was a big Shirley Temple fan, giving my age away. But I was a huge Shirley Temple fan. And when she went through some stuff, I'm sitting there crying and my siblings looking at me like, what is wrong with you? That piece where that could possibly be something called compassion, maybe. And not somebody necessarily being weak, So being able to release and do it freely without judgment is huge. It really is huge. I really want people, the biggest takeaway I want people to have is not only to see how I made connections and the tools that I use to help me maintain, is you're not alone. You're really not alone, even if you are crying. And hopefully those of us who aren't crying are a little bit more open to being compassionate and saying, are you okay? Or just even making eye contact. I can hear you. Let me let you know I can hear you just by looking at you, or I'm willing to hear you. May not have nothing for you, but I'm willing to at least listen to you, because even in the listening, you may be a resource to that person. You may be able to make a different connection for that person.
That is amazing. And so I want to say to each and every one of you that are listening to this particular episode, first and foremost, if this episode speaks to you, I want to see it in comments. I want to see it in the reviews. I want you to share this episode out, because there may be somebody that that may be going through something, or they're at that point where they're starting to say, you know what, I really want to share my story. I want to become the speaker. I want to become the author. Or even as an entrepreneur, I just want to be able to have my message shared in some way. Definitely, you want to make sure that they get the resources that they need. That's always the top priority, is that they get the resources that they need in order to make that a reality for them. And so with that being said, let them know how they can find you on social media, how they can get the book as well, and get in contact with you.
Well, I do, because you have been so gracious in sharing this platform with me. I want to share with your listeners a giveaway. So if you are of the first 5 people that have, chimed in, whether you just said, hey, hi, please send me your contact information to dollymommy.or@gmail.com. It's DOLLYM. Okay, lost my spelling. Got to work with that marketing piece. Got the message, need the marketing. But it's DOLLYMOMMY.OR@gmail.com. Send me your information, and I will send out to you a signed first release copy. And for those after the first 5, I will send you a link for a discount to purchase the book. Social media, I'm trying to do better, but Amicable, Amicable, AMICABLE_solutions. That's my IG. And I'm on that frequently. I may not post much, but I do see, you'll definitely see me in yoga, crocheting, again, part of my mental health toolbox, as well as Facebook is of the same, Amicable Solutions, Amicable_Solutions.
That's great, guys. And so again, this topic, I know it's a heavy topic sometimes because it's one of those topics that we don't normally talk about. It's one of those that y'all know that I often tell you, it's that box that's wrapped up with a bow on it, that's sitting on the mantle that nobody talks about. Nobody wants to open and say why nobody wants to open it or why it's just sitting there. It just kind of sits there in plain view, but still not really something everyone talks about. And so I always want you guys to get the information that you need, get the resources that you need, but ultimately every episode is for you to take action. And so if it's now is the time that you're supposed to be telling your story, reach out, connect. If now is the time that you're saying, you know what, I just want to be able to get my story out of my head, not necessarily publish it, not necessarily speak on a stage, reach out, because there are resources that are available for you to be able to do just that. Connect. That is a huge, huge thing that I'm always pushing for you guys. Because again, that's what may take you to that whole next level. And you may start a business on the back end of, going through this process of telling your story. So with that being said, for those of you who are speakers and authors, I always appreciate you guys coming and joining me on the podcast. You can choose your date if you haven't done so already by going to bit.ly/speakeasy podcast, all lowercase, in order for you to come and be a guest on the Speakeasy podcast with me, your host, Altavius Pelzer, the voice coach, professional speaker, certified life coach, Amazon bestselling author, and podcaster. And guys, listen, I understand that it's difficult sometimes. I understand that, we go through some things, but you are definitely not by yourself. With that being said, I appreciate you, because without you, there is no Speakeasy podcast. So for every listener, every viewer, every reviewer, thank you so much for sharing it out and being a part of the conversation. Until next time, guys, don't forget to press it out. See ya.